Why are AAA video games no longer fun? If you're here for the short answer, COVID-19 created the same scenarios that caused the 1983 video game crash at these companies. Like the video and subscribe. If you're here for the longer answer, here we go. AAA games appear to be getting worse. But why don't they fix their problems? It's because of COVID-19. And before we explain how COVID led to the second video game crash, we need to provide context of the video game crash in 1983. The video game crash was caused by 1. Too many video game consoles, 2. Too many games, 3. The games that are out are trash, where it's more useful as compost than video game, ET. 4. The golden age in arcade gaming didn't help either. So, first off, you need to ask yourself, were there so many video games back then? Despite the social attitude of video games being very negative until recently. It's quite simple. It made a ton of money. It's like crypto. People only cared about the skyrocketing valuation of made-up monies and actual value. For example, you got this awesome lineup here before the crash. You got E.T., you got Sewer Mania, you got Garbage Belly, you got 101 Monochrome Mazes, and the blockbuster Quaker Oats video game. Okay? Definitely worth the $63 to $95 inflation adjusted. Sign me up for the pre-order, especially the last one since it was made by a really successful game studio that came up with Frogger. Okay? Sarcasm aside, it now makes sense why it got a crash. Now let's compare the conditions with COVID. So 1. Too many game consoles. What's the core issues behind too many consoles? It's that it made playing all the games they want to play more expensive, okay? Similar to the fragmentation of streaming services, many game studios also rely on investors to drive further growth. There are 2 ways to please an investor. 1, profits delivered. 2, the mission of the company. Okay? Many AAA studios chose the first option. Main issue, though, is that many of these AAA studios know advertising has its limits for mass appeal. Okay? And there's also many players willing to spend more on gaming as gamers are more invested into the medium. Therefore, in order to maximize profits, it's easier to monetize the user base you already have. How? Easy. Lock the fun behind the price tag. Don't believe me? Listen to the former CEO of EA talking about genius monetization methods to investors.
The second thing, and this is a point that I think might be lost on many, is a big and substantial portion of digital revenues are microtransactions. When you are 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo in your clip and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not very price sensitive at that point in time. And for what it's worth, the cogs on the clip really low. And so essentially what ends up happening, and the reason the play first, pay later model works so nicely, is the consumer gets engaged in a property. They might spend 10, 20, 30, 50 hours on the game. And then when they're deep into the game, they're well invested in it. We're not gouging, but we're charging. And at that point in time, the commitment can be pretty high. As a personal anecdote, I spent about $5,000 calendar year to date on doing just this type of thing on our products and others. I can readily attest to how well it works. But it's a great model, and I think it represents a substantially better future for the industry.
Now, as someone that plays video games, that sounds ridiculous, but to the investors, it made perfect sense because this is just adding a couple lines of code compared to an ad where you have to pay money to get more users. So this attitude led to the increased costs in video games that had a similar effect to having too many video game consoles that caused gaming to crash, caused the video game crash of 1983. Whether it be microtransactions that are pay to win or a total ripoff. $80 Darth Vader, anyone? And also, in addition to that, most games require a large price and no try before you buy, especially outside of Steam. Okay, $60 is a lot compared to $10, okay, that a movie has. Okay, and you also got the massive increase in microtransactions beyond the base game you buy. Okay, and this eventually wears down consumers. For example, I am a gaming wall. Okay, if I have I used to spend $500 per mobile game that got me playing for at least 1 year, and that I thought was a really good video game. But I hit to a point where I realized I could save more money with more fun, okay, by just playing on PC. And I then stopped spending money on in-app purchases, both in like mobile, but also in PC games. Okay, the only game I actually spent in-app purchases for was Team Fortress 2, and it's just because I thought it was such a fantastic game that I kind of feel guilty that they don't get any kind of money. Okay, and I only gave them like $20, which I thought was a fair price for a game of that quality. Okay, but outside that, I just refuse to touch any of that other stuff. And now, there's a lot more people like me who are slowly waking up and just not supporting these games, trying to suck out every dollar of our wallet. Now, we're going to be talking about number 2, which is too many video games. So with the increased demand in video games, games need to come out like hotcakes to meet the demand, which means lots of hiring and very minimal quality checks. Many people started learning how to build video games as well, and this increased interest in art with all the free time that people got with COVID, which further increased the supply of video games. Now everybody is no longer trapped inside. Gamers are more mindful with what they play, and okay, now that video games have to compete with other mediums now. Number 3, low quality of video games. Game devs got a lot of flack for their games before COVID, but consumers still kept buying these video games, despite YouTubers declaring every new release be the worst game ever to get views. Such as like these people like complaining about Stalker 2, despite it being, in my personal opinion, being a very fantastic game. However, the events in COVID, coupled with bad games with culture war politics that cancels their customers, that things started to get more dicey. And why did they do this? Remember what investors expect: profits or the mission. This was the other route a studio follows to appease investors. Was the easy mission to include ESG or whatever buzzword like DEI corporate America repeats, like NPCs to raise stock value. However, this crossed the line for most consumers this time. Okay, so during this tough market for video games, we're going to talk about some AAA-like studios that have thrived. Okay, you got Elden Ring, you got Stalker 2, you got Space Marines, you got Black Myth Wukong, okay? What's the key difference with those games and all these other video games? They are not hiring activists, quote unquote, who complain about crusty white dudes when talking about their game, or other people who obsessively like telling you and your kids who they like to sleep with and how, in addition with some information about their privates, okay? So, it kind of makes sense for consumers to start to draw a little bit more of a line. It makes sense, and also why people aren't buying it. And this time, it's not the media that's getting canceled. It's media. They hired the folks from Bluesky and Twitter, okay? And now these folks, because they can't cancel their employers, they're now trying to cancel their customers. And it's interesting to see how this stuff like this turns out. Oh yeah, the sales explained it. Okay. And the problem is with these people is that they care about anything but providing good escapism and much rather preach about how evil their fans are than actually having a good video game. Okay. There are left-leaning folks, okay, in the video game industry who actually know, hey, this stuff isn't a good idea. Let's look at Steam, okay? They worked with the Sweet Baby Inc. Mafia, but they minded their own business when appropriate and avoided coming off like abrasive jerks, okay? It's common sense to not make fun of the people who are buying your games, okay? This stuff is now a heuristic with this woke stuff for a good game or not, okay? The fact that it's a heuristic now, okay, with some of the largest curators on Steam detecting this woke stuff, okay, maybe it's a sign that it's not a good idea to keep this stuff up, okay? And also with number 4, the end of a golden age. Okay, so easy money for studios was a golden age for studios, but investors always come with conditions. Okay, game studios, they don't have as much leverage as a normal business has because an entertainment industry is a lot more risky. And this forces these studios to compromise on what worked in the past such as who they hire, what they create, and taking out the creative edginess that most gamers love in order to get investors appeased. And remember how each AAA game, okay, specifically Call of Duty, used to casually offend journalists who don't know the difference between a Nintendo console and a PlayStation. Yeah, I do, okay? And you still have this with smaller studios, but now you only hear this with games like Ready or Not, that was like a couple years ago, okay? Games like those and like Call of Duty in the past, there are games that push the boundaries for universes that provided fun escapism and conveyed nuance in a creative way that's only possible in the medium of video games, okay? Video games no longer do that, and the easy money made video game studios focus less on their creative efforts and more on appeasing investors and avoiding this creative edginess that causes controversy. Okay, for example, in the 1990s, video games were so controversial that Mortal Kombat, okay, they had a congressional hearing, which is normally done for like national security threats and other stuff like that. And Call of Duty, like they're always on there. Just just the journalists absolutely hated them. Such even as recent as 2019, where Call of Duty Modern Warfare ticked off a lot of journalists because it was too realistic. Okay, so in conclusion, though, like we're staring down the barrel of another 1983 style video game crash for the AAA industry. Indie game studios, they'll be fine. But the main issue is that they're an entirely different market than AAA. Indie, they're more niche, while AAA is for the masses. Therefore, unless AAA studios focus on quality games, okay, like Nintendo did to revive the video game industry during the first crash, then expect more AAA studios to fail, which means more layoffs and more studios running out of money. Hope this video is informative. Like the video and subscribe, and outside of that, I hope you have a good day.